Good evening. I'm GeoWeather forecaster and GIS analyst Andrew Fleck. We're just going to sit down here very shortly and discuss the upcoming pattern on into the weekend for our forecast region. We're going to look at the GFS model, and we're going to use this great model platform. I highly recommend it. Levi Cohen, he actually customizes these models. There's a great page on his site, tropicaltidbits.com. Be sure to go there. You can look at these models yourself. But this great interface we have here, we're going to talk about, again, that weekend pattern oncoming for the area. So what I'm going to show you are three different types of parameters. What I'm going to have in front of you is the GFS model surface pressure anomalies. So where you have the darker blues is where you're most susceptible to having low pressure systems. Low pressure systems equals stormy weather. The direct opposite goes for the lighter colors, even into that deep red. That indicates high pressure. So obviously drier weather, nicer weather, sometimes warmer, sometimes cooler. So look for that blue. That blue is generally where you're looking at stormier weather. So what exactly are we looking at, and why are we looking at this for the weekend? There's obviously been some storm talk. There's obviously a pattern that's in place that does even indicate some storms, but why really is that the case? Well, we're looking at hour 84 here, so this is going to be a frame into the Saturday and Sunday, and we have obviously two pairs of high pressures up here in Canada. We have another high pressure down here, and it seems like out of central Canada in the upper interior of our country has a lot of blue pluming from it and on its direction eastward or southeastward, and this is going to be our pattern into the weekend. We're going to see a lot of our flow, or our directional flow, moving northwest to southeast. That's going to mean cold weather. That's going to mean low pressure systems here. And eventually, what the model is indicating is the pattern eventually backs up. We're going to have a real easy flow of cold weather throughout the week, and then the pattern's going to back up. Let me explain what happens here when we talk about a pattern backing up. So this is obviously 84 hours, so we're on our way Saturday on into Sunday. We have indicated there's high pressures up here. We've indicated there's high pressures off the Atlantic seaboard, and we obviously have ourselves this directional flow. Okay, and we talked about storms aiming in that direction. We talked about cold weather doing about the same. Now watch what happens when I animate. You're going to start to see a bit of blue developing here off the eastern seaboard, and remember what that blue indicates, folks. That is where stormy weather exists, and we're looking at pressure here. Okay, pressure anomalies. So we're looking at some sense of blue, something that's going to develop, and that would indicate a storm. But the general idea here is looking at the pattern, the synoptic pattern on what's creating this. So let me just scale forward these frames, and I want you to watch very closely what happens. So you start getting a bit of a dent in the pattern, and you see that right here. Now again, take into consideration we have our high pressures up here, we have our low pressures out here. The flow has got to go this way. So we begin to see a dent right in the pattern there. Now watch what happens for the eastern seaboard come around the weekend. We start to see a little blue develop. So there's what's happening. Very, very easily a signature of a ridge up here. That's beginning to back this entire pattern, and that's now going to create a trough. And this is where we're getting a storm developing. That's why you start seeing on other media outlets that there's a low pressure storm of some sorts, some rain, some mix, some snow. Some other outlets have talked about big snows. We're not talking about that generally here at GeoWeather just right now, but there is an indication that with this pattern there could very well be a storm for the weekend into early next week. Then of course we'll continue to show the frame that the more the pattern backs up, the more that the trough on the eastern seaboard does begin to dig, and that's what indicates our storm or some area of low pressure. So again, a great analogy for a pattern backing up is, you have obviously an accident out over the middle half of the country here, and what happens is, all of this more energy eventually wants to push eastward, that northwest to southeast directional flow. And when all of this begins to pile up, it has to basically back all that traffic up, and there's nothing that can flow, and then eventually that begins to squeeze the pattern out Obviously, common physics, common meteorology, when there's a ridge, there's a low, and there's a low generally on the eastern seaboard. So that's obviously another lesson, or at least something that we always tend to find in the pattern, especially during the winter time from the central to eastern United States. And then we'll show you one more parameter here. This is to kind of help you guys with the temperatures out. It'll also show where we have low pressures in place. This again coming through Saturday and Sunday. We have the directional flow here. We have our low pressure. Temperatures are staying about cold enough through the mid-Atlantic, northeast, solid and cold. That's helped by these joint high pressures. You have a little bit of moisture helped. Obviously, high pressures move clockwise, and so that's where storm is going to be able to cross the country. It's going to be able to get some energy filled with it from that high spinning off the Atlantic coast, cold weather from the north, and that's why as we move the frames here, we begin to see a storm developing. Cold weather, it develops, it strengthens, cold air behind, and that's why people in places among us are talking about storms. They're talking about a pattern that's likely for it. So we'll have to sit here and watch, but that's kind of what I take of it, not looking at generally the storm, but generally looking at the pattern, and within the pattern we try to find the storm. And we're thinking that given this type of pattern, it does call for some sort of storm anywhere from the mid-Atlantic to the northeast. However, generally with these storm systems, you either have more of a later bloomer storm, usually off the Delmarva, New Jersey, more common though up toward Long Island, obviously Cape Cod and eastward. So we're going to have to watch. We're going to have to watch where all of this begins to unfold throughout the next few days, and maybe we'll even be starting to talk about storms soon enough. So keep your eyes to GeoWeather. This is where we do weather our way.